There was a time when just thinking about work made my chest feel tight. Not because I didn't care, not because I was lazy, but because every task came wrapped in dread. I'd look at my to-do list and feel this quiet resistance rise up. Emails, sales pages, content, decisions. And the phrase that ran through my head over and over was, I have to do this. That single sentence made everything feel heavier than it needed to be. What I didn't realise at the time was that this wasn't a motivation problem. It was a language problem. Most people think dread comes from the work itself, but dread doesn't come from tasks. It comes from the meaning we attach to tasks. And meaning is shaped almost entirely by the language we use in our own head. Once I changed that language, my relationship with work changed completely. Let me explain what I mean. When you say, I have to do this, your brain hears obligation, pressure, loss of control, threat. I have to signals that something is being forced onto you, and the brain doesn't respond well to that. It responds with resistance. This is backed by psychology. When people feel controlled, even by their own internal language, their motivation drops. Stress increases, avoidance increases, and procrastination suddenly makes perfect sense. Your brain is trying to reclaim autonomy. This was exactly what was happening to me when I was building my business. On paper, I was doing everything right. I had goals and plans and deadlines, but internally my self-talk sounded like this. I have to finish this page. I have to send this email. I have to work on marketing. Every task felt like a demand. And the more important the task was, the more pressure it carried, which meant the more my brain resisted it. That resistance showed up as procrastination, but it wasn't procrastination driven by laziness. It was procrastination driven by dread, and dread is emotional. You don't solve emotional problems with better to-do lists. You solve them by changing the emotional context. This realization hit me during a period when I was avoiding the most important work in my business. I was spending hours perfecting things that felt safe, design tweaks, formatting, planning, but anything that involved being visible, selling, or making decisions, I'd freeze, and then I'd beat myself up for freezing, which made the dread worse. Eventually I noticed something subtle. Every task I was avoiding had the same internal label. I have to. I have to send this. I have to launch this. I have to decide this. And that language was turning work into a psychological threat. That's when I started experimenting with what I now call the Task Reframe Trick. One of the core pillars of my momentum reset method. It's deceptively simple, but it's powerful. Here's the shift. Instead of saying, I have to do this, you say, I get to do this. At first that might sound cheesy or fake or forced. I felt that too. But stick with me, because this isn't about positive thinking. It's about restoring choice. I get to does something important. It tells your brain that you are choosing this task, that you have agency, that you're not trapped, and that single change moves the task out of the threat category. This matters because the brain reacts very differently to obligations versus choice. Obligation triggers stress. Choice triggers engagement, even if the task is the same. Let me be clear. I get to doesn't mean you suddenly love the task. It doesn't mean the work becomes easy. It means the work becomes voluntary, and voluntary action feels safer. Here's how this played out for me. Instead of saying, I have to write this sales page, I started saying, I get to write this because it's how people discover my work. Instead of, I have to send this email, it became, I get to send this because it moves my business forward. That reframing didn't make the task magical, but it removed the dread, and without dread, starting became possible. When people reconnect a task to personal values or desired outcomes, motivation increases, not because of discipline, but because meaning replaces pressure. This is why so many productivity systems fail. They focus on what to do, but they ignore how you're talking to yourself while you're doing it. And that internal dialogue can make the difference between flow and freeze. The task reframe trick works best when combined with the other momentum reset pillars. If a task is massive and unclear, no reframe will save it. That's where micro missions come in. If you're mentally overloaded, language alone won't fix it. That's where the overwhelm audit matters. And if your nervous system is already stressed, you need regulation first. But once those conditions are in place, language becomes a powerful lever. Here's the practical way to use this. Whenever you notice dread around a task, pause. Listen for the phrase, I have to, then consciously replace it with I get to, and immediately follow it with a reason that matters to you, not a generic reason, a personal one. For example, I get to work on this because it builds the life I want. I get to do this because it supports my family. I get to take this step because it moves me closer to freedom. This reconnects the task to choice and meaning. Something interesting happens when you do this consistently. The emotional tone of work changes. Tasks feel lighter, resistance softens, self-judgment drops, and productivity becomes calmer. Not frantic, not forced, just steady. This was a turning point for me. Work stopped feeling like something that was happening to me. It became something I was participating in. And that shift removed a huge amount of dread. If you want to try this today, do this simple exercise. Pick one task you're avoiding. Notice how you're describing it internally. If the phrase, I have to, is anywhere in there, pause. Rewrite it as I get to, and then ask, what does this make possible for me? Say it out loud if you can. You'll feel the shift. This isn't about lying to yourself. It's about telling the full truth. Yes, the task may be inconvenient, but it's also a step towards something you want. And your brain needs to hear that. The Task Reframe Trick is one of the reasons the momentum reset method works so well. It removes unnecessary emotional friction, and once friction is gone, momentum becomes much easier to build. If this resonates with you and you want a structured way to apply this alongside clarity, micro actions, dopamine anchors, and momentum sprints, you'll find the full framework in the momentum reset method. There's a link in the description. But even if you never explore that, remember this. Dread isn't inevitable. Sometimes all it takes is changing the sentence you repeat to yourself. If this video helped you, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel for more calm, practical tools for overcoming procrastination and building momentum without burnout. And I'd love to know, let me know in the comments, what's one task that you've been saying I have to about lately.